The landmark album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles marked a turning point in rock where styles of music became genres and popular music splintered into a bunch of different directions. One of these directions was hard rock, and the band leading the charge was Steppenwolf. I'll take you through their humble Canadian beginnings, through their formation in California, here on Pop Goes the 60s. Their story begins in Oshawa, Ontario, with a group called Jack London and the Sparrows. Jack London was from England, and the group formed and they all took on English accents to capitalize on the British invasion. After moving to Toronto in late 1964, the group signed with Capitol Records and scored a #3 hit with their debut single.
If you don't want my love, if you don't want my kiss, I'll get a girl who treats me better than you.
That song hit #3 on the Canadian RPM chart, and although the song sounds rather trite, at least it was an original by Jack London and guitarist Dennis Edmonton. Let's go through the members here. We have Jack London on vocals, Dennis Edmonton on lead guitar, Bruce Palmer on bass, CJ Feeney on organ, and Jerry Edmonton on drums. An album and 4 more forgettable singles followed, but there was unrest in the band because Jack London, who had signed the contract on behalf of the band, cut him in for a bigger part of the money. And obviously this led to some resentment within the band, and so much so that Jack London was forced to go solo, let's put it that way.
I'm having a hard time with the law. I think they're gonna put me back in jail if they want me.
Without Jack London, they'd simply called themselves the Sparrows, and that song was a #13 hit on the RPM chart. We are in September of 1965, and the band needed a new singer, and they also were looking at going in a new musical direction. So a full band shakeup happened here, where they ended up trading bass player Bruce Palmer to the Minor Birds. In exchange, got Nick St. Nicholas. Also coming from the Minor Birds was Goldie McJohn. Now through Nick St. Nicholas, he brought in John Kay, who was a aspiring blues singer and folk singer on the Canadian scene. John Kay was originally a German immigrant who came to Canada in the 50s and found himself singing in Toronto clubs by 1963. Kay brought a gritty vocal style to the group that really gave them a tough sound. Now the members at this point are John Kay on vocals, guitar, and harmonica, Dennis Edmonton on lead guitar, Nick St. Nicholas on bass, Goldie McJohn on keyboards, organ, and Jerry Edmonton on drums. Now that you know who's in the group The Sparrows, I just want to back up a second here because none of these guys used their original names. So first of all, Jack London, who is already out of the band, his real name was Dave Martin. So he, wanted to use this British, the Beatlemania thing, Union Jack and London. I mean, could you be more obvious? Dennis and Jerry Edmonton, their last name is actually McCrohan. So they changed their name to Edmonton because that's where they were from. Goldie McJohn's name is John Goldsby. Nick St. Nicholas's name is Klaus Kosbaum, and John Kay, of course, is Joachim Kroladat. So they changed their names to names that were easier to remember and much easier to pronounce. Rebranding themselves as the Sparrows, the group started rehearsing at the McCrohan's house, that's the Edmonton brothers, and they took on this harder rock sound. And all was not well in the band, though. This was not easy for John Kay because he had never been in a rock band. He was just a solo folk and blues singer with an acoustic guitar. So first of all, they had to change his look. They got rid of his slick back hair and he got a much more tough look to match the rest of the band. Performances at Toronto's key venues such as the Devil's Den, El Patio, and Chez Monique, where they drew crowds for their extended blues jams. They were immersing themselves in the Yorkville scene, in the Yorkville neighborhood of Toronto, which was kind of the bohemian cultural center. It's basically the Greenwich Village of Toronto. And they solidified their reputation as a band by being a really solid blues rock outfit. Throughout 1966, the band continued to establish themselves, mainly because of the stage presence of John Kay, as he got more and more comfortable and commanded the stage. Now they're in Yorkville, so they're introduced to drugs like marijuana and LSD. So this was starting to change their music a little bit, but they sought a bigger market and a bigger audience for their music, and they realized they had to go to New York in order to get that. The move to New York prompted a further name change. They were simply called the Sparrow right now, and they got some management in the form of Stanton Freeman. Now, Freeman was able to help get them a recording deal with Columbia Records. And at this time, the band they were doing Stones and Animals covers, Yardbirds covers, kind of folk rock and blues with a tinge of psychedelia thrown in. And they started recording.
Things that used to be, they're not the same to me. Tomorrow sure has come for me. Step into a cloud and fade so deep away. Ah, yes.
Their initial recordings were done in August of 1966. And for this first single, they went a little bit more on the psychedelic side. And this is, Dennis Edmonton wrote these songs. And they sound a little bit birdsy, as a matter of fact, a little jangly. So folk rock was still going strong at the time. And this single did well regionally, but really got minor airplay across the country and did not chart.
Wonder if it's time to water my green bottle lover. I'm afraid to take a trip.
Green Bottle Lover was released in early 1967. So this whole move to New York was fraught with difficulties. They had visa problems, they had trouble getting steady gigs, financial ventures fell apart, and they started to evaluate their direction. Now, one thing that they were able to do was get back into the studio and record what was going to be their first album.
Low man's all down the line, but too late now to sing your song. Down goes your love life. Oh, at 6 a.m. this morning, you know the man knocked on my door. But I'm aware how she keeps on changing. She'd better listen and start rearranging.
All those songs are originals, mostly featuring Dennis Edmonton's writing, and these songs featured, pretty gritty vocals and guitar riffs and some interesting writing, but it wasn't what the label was looking for. So promotional activities included radio pushes for the singles on both the East and West Coast, and those singles that they had already released still did nothing. So because of the failure of the singles, Columbia didn't have any faith in this group, so they didn't release the album. Due to the failures they were having with Columbia, they proceeded to go as planned to California, where they foresaw superior gigs and better industry connections. And they were right. They went to Los Angeles and they quickly got a one-week gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go, where they were opening for the Sir Douglas Quintet. They got further gigs opening for the Doors and the Steve Miller Band, and people liked their high blues energy. They were well liked in Los Angeles, but because of the riots on Sunset Strip, that changed some of the booking policies. All these clubs went to 21 and over, so they were looking for more straight R&B singers and bands. So a lot of bands were out of a job, and Steppenwolf was one of them. So they went up to San Francisco to try their luck up there and found themselves playing at the Matrix in the Avalon Ballroom. Now those songs I just played for you were live at the Matrix in May of '67. And The Pusher was one of their songs that they would stretch out for over 20 minutes. And that particular version has this weird guitar freak out. So it's got all the elements a lot of the bands were doing that they started to pick up, and that became part of their act. The Sparrow did well in San Francisco, and as John Kay later explained, he said, we were stoned, the audience was stoned, so we were all in sync with one another. So that was one of the things that made the San Francisco sound work, is because of that synchronicity between fans and performers. Despite immersing themselves in California's counterculture, the band was still having problems getting steady work. I mean, the competition was fierce, so they would go back to Los Angeles and try to get work there. But the psychedelic bands happened to be overshadowing them because they were more of a blues rock outfit, which was not really super in step with the times. They did have psychedelic elements in their stage act for sure, and I think that was appreciated, but there was a lot of competition, a lot of other bands were outshining them, which frustrated the band. A major blow came to the band when Dennis Edmonton announced that he was going to be leaving the group to concentrate on being a songwriter. So there were several commitments yet that the band had to perform at, and Edmonton stayed for those, but the band began to unravel. They did hire another guitarist to take his place named Michael Monarch, and he was only 17 years old and a fine player, but he was a little too young to carry the band. Dennis left, that was in June of '67, and a couple months later, the Sparrow officially disbanded. We're in August 1967, and everybody's out of a job except for Nick St. Nicholas, who got a job with the band called Hard Times. Now, John Kay was having a really hard time finding work as a blues singer in LA at this time, and he and his wife had recently gotten married, and she was pregnant. So they rented an upstairs apartment over a garage, and luckily they had a neighbor by the name of Gabriel Meckler. Now, Meckler was a producer at Dunhill Records, and he had been producing The Lamp of Childhood, which really didn't take off. So as he got to know John Kay, Kay started playing him some of the Sparrow tapes on reel to reel, and Meckler said, well, this is pretty good. I think we might be able to do something with this. Are you still in touch with the guys in the band? And he said, well, we're broken up, but let me see who's available. So Goldie McJohn was available, and Jerry Edmonton agreed to join. Michael Monarch was still in town, so he agreed. So they basically only needed a bass player. So they put an ad in the paper, and they got a guy by the name of Rushton Morive. In keeping with the trend of the band, Rushton Morive's real name was John Russell Morgan. The only guy who didn't have a name change was Michael Monarch, which is a pretty cool name. So at this point, Jerry Edmonton called his brother Dennis, saying, hey, we need some songs. What have you got? So Dennis offered them some songs that he had been writing, and as the band gelled, Gabriel Meckler would check in on them and say, okay, yeah, you're getting it. So they were breaking in a new bass player, plus Monarch had only been with them for about a month or so they were trying to get used to each other and hone their sound. Apparently it didn't take long for Meckler to decide to present them to Dunhill Records, which they did, and they got the contract. And at this point, they changed their name to Steppenwolf. Now, that name came from the novel by Herman Hesse that Meckler was reading. So they said, okay, that's good enough, let's go, let's record.
That's all I knew. Someone I used to talk to when with me.
That was their first single, A Girl I Knew, from October of 1967. It did not chart, and initial recording in the studio went slow. They were recording at United Western, and they weren't getting along with the engineers, and it just was not feeling right. So they switched to a smaller studio, which was American Recording Studios, which was a converted Chinese restaurant. Now, they loved the coziness of this place. It was much more intimate. And they completed the rest of the album in 4 days at a cost of $9,000. And the music maintained their hard rock sound, but with some psychedelic effects along the way.
She's home alone, she's lost another one. Met him yesterday, now he's home. Take my hand, sweet darling, wipe that frown off your face. I don't love anyone but drain your brain for 18 years. With the promise of security.
Those songs were quality tracks, but the strongest work was buried in blues.
The gypsy woman told my mama, why don't you try to talk the little girl up that you before? the pusher.
The Pusher was a song they'd been playing as the Sparrow. That was written by Hoyt Axton, an anti-drug song. That was a song where they would get all psychedelic on, and that's one of the stronger tracks on this album. And a second single reflected this approach.
Let it hang out, baby. Let it hang out now.
We are in February of 1968 with the second single, Sookie Sookie. And it actually did chart in Canada at number 92, although it just missed the charts here in the United States. So it was moving in a positive direction, but not enough for the record company. Now, they were going to do a third single, and one of the band really liked Dennis Edmonton's song, Born to be Wild. Dennis Edmonton at this point is going by the name of Mars Bonfire. He changed his name again. So the band was playing Born to be Wild in the clubs and live, and they started to get really comfortable with it. They wanted to release it as a single. The record company did not want to release this song. So after arguing a bit over it, they agreed to release a single and not designate the A or B side and see which one would win out.
Born to be wild.
Born to be Wild won out over the other side of the single, Everybody's Next One, hitting number 2 in the United States and number 1 in Canada. So they have a huge hit on their hands, and by this time it's already summer of '68, so the album had already been climbing the charts. So the timing of this was perfect. They had a couple singles already out, and everything started to go right for the band. For Steppenwolf, the third time was the charm with that single, and prior to it becoming a hit, the background of that song is that Dennis Edmonton had saved enough money to buy a used car, and he bought a Ford Falcon. And in that Falcon, he used to go out to the mountains and the deserts, and that's where the inspiration came for Born to be Wild. He said, I got the basic guitar riff quick, and the lyrics were written chronologically. So it was not originally a hard rocker. It was a little more mellow when he originally wrote it. He said this, one afternoon I had encountered a thunderstorm so ferocious I had to pull over. The sky was ominous, the color of lead. I was struggling to describe it in words until I remembered the periodic table of elements I'd studied during chemistry. The term heavy metals came into my head, which gave me the line, I like smoke and lightning, heavy metal thunder. So it's ironic that a song so connected with motorcycles and Harley Davidson was really inspired from driving around a Ford Falcon. All right, so let's have a look at the first album. Here's a self-titled album, Steppenwolf. It has this attractive foil cover on it, and it's produced by Gabriel Meckler. And the thing about this album that worked, it was gold by fall. And because they had been touring so much when those singles came out, and they slowly picked up, and finally the big hit was Born to be Wild. So everything just hit at the right time, and this went gold. So as I said earlier, that pop music had splintered into all these different directions, hard rock being one of them. And the single Born to be Wild was really the kickoff of this new style. It was the biggest hit out of any of this style of music. But here are 3 bands that pioneered the new style. All these albums came out in January of 1968. We have Blue Cheer's album Vincebus Eruptum on January 16th, Iron Butterfly's Heavy on January 22nd, and the Steppenwolf album came out on January 29th. This new sound changed the direction of rock music, and Steppenwolf was at the forefront. So if 1967 was the summer of love, 1968 was the year of revolt, and we'll explore that next in part 2 here on Pop Goes the 60s.